I live alone, and for the most part, I've always been fine with it. My routine is simple. I get home from work, make myself something to eat, and then go upstairs to study in my little office. My desk is right next to a window that faces the front of the house. It's nothing fancy, just a simple view of the driveway and the street beyond it. The neighborhood is pretty quiet, and most nights it's just me, my books, and the occasional sound of a car passing by. One night, about 1 year ago, I was at my desk like usual. It was around 9 p.m., and I had my lamp on, casting just enough light for me to read. I was focused on my notes when I felt this odd sensation, like someone was watching me. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just me being paranoid. But after a while, I couldn't shake the feeling. I glanced up and looked out the window. That's when I saw him. A man was standing across the street, just barely lit by the street lamp. He wasn't moving, just standing there looking in my direction. It was hard to make out his face because of the shadows, but I could tell he was facing me. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but he didn't move for several minutes. It was unsettling, but I told myself I was being silly and went back to my work. About 10 minutes later, I glanced out the window again. He was still there, but now he was closer. He had crossed the street and was standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. My stomach dropped. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but this was getting weird. I tried to focus on my studying, but I kept glancing at the window. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring. I finally decided to close the blinds. I figured if he couldn't see me, maybe he'd go away. I sat back down and tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe he was lost or waiting for someone and it just looked like he was staring at me. But then I heard it, the sound of the doorbell. I froze. My heart was pounding and I didn't know what to do. Who rings someone's doorbell at 9:30 at night? I crept down the stairs as quietly as I could and peeked through the peephole. It was him. He was standing on my porch, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. He didn't look angry or anything, but he wasn't smiling either. He just looked blank. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out, "Who is it?" No answer. He just stood there. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Still nothing. He didn't move, didn't say a word. I started to panic. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police," I shouted through the door. That got no reaction either. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then he started knocking. It wasn't loud or frantic, just a steady, deliberate knock. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away from the door, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. The operator was calm and reassuring. She told me to stay on the line and not to open the door. She said officers were on their way. I stayed in the hallway, clutching the phone and watching the door, half expecting him to try to break in, but he didn't. He just kept knocking. After about 5 minutes, the knocking stopped. I waited, holding my breath, hoping he had left. I crept back to the peephole and looked out. He was gone. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The police arrived a few minutes later, and I explained what had happened. They looked around the property and the neighborhood but didn't find anyone. They told me to call them if he came back and left me their card. For a few nights, things were quiet. I kept the blinds closed and tried to go about my routine, but I couldn't shake the unease. Every little noise made me jump, and I found myself constantly checking the locks on the doors and windows. I even started leaving a light on in the living room, just in case. Then, about a week later, it happened again. I was upstairs at my desk, trying to study, when I felt that same sensation of being watched. My heart sank. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. I peeked through the edge of the blinds, and there he was, standing in the same spot across the street. This time, I didn't wait. I called the police immediately. While I was on the phone with the operator, he started walking toward my house. I told her what was happening, and she assured me that officers were on their way. By the time he got to my porch, I was hiding in the hallway again, clutching my phone like a lifeline. He rang the doorbell once, then started knocking. just like before. Knock, knock, knock. The police arrived faster this time. I heard their car pull up and I peeked out just in time to see the man walking away. The officers stopped him and questioned him right there on the sidewalk. One of them came to talk to me while the others stayed with him. They said he claimed he was looking for someone and must have had the wrong house. They didn't have enough to arrest him but told him to stay away from my property. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few days later, when I came home from work, there was a note taped to my front door. It was written on a scrap of paper in messy handwriting. All it said was, "Yesterday, you didn't come to the window." I don't live there anymore. I couldn't. I packed up and moved out within a week. I'm staying with a friend now, and I'll never live alone again. No one could help me, not really, and the thought of him still out there watching is something I'll never be able to shake. At first, it was harmless. A friendly wave, a casual hello at the coffee shop. Then he started showing up everywhere. I don't even know when I first noticed it. Maybe it was at the grocery store when I saw him near the frozen aisle, staring at his phone but not really looking at it. Maybe it was the subway ride home when I caught him in the reflection of the window 3 seats away, pretending not to see me. His name was Eric. Just some guy. He wasn't a stranger, but he wasn't a friend either. I knew him from the gym. We had talked once or twice, just small talk. I don't even remember what about. He seemed nice, normal, but now he was everywhere. At first I thought I was imagining it. Big city, lots of people, coincidences happen, right? But then the coincidences became too frequent, too precise. I'd stop at my usual coffee shop and he'd be there, sitting by the window. I'd take a different subway route and he'd be on the same train. I'd get home, and there'd be a notification. He viewed my Instagram story, again. I stopped posting where I was. I stopped checking in. But he still found me. One day I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, saw you at the bookstore today, you looked beautiful." I hadn't told anyone I was going to the bookstore. I felt sick. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and convinced myself it was nothing. But the next day, another message. "I think we have a lot in common. Would love to talk more." I never replied. That didn't stop him. It got worse. He started leaving comments on my old posts, things I hadn't even thought about in years. He liked a photo from 3 years ago, a selfie I barely remembered taking. I set everything to private. It didn't matter. He still knew where I was. I told my friends. "He probably just has a crush," one said. "Maybe he just lives nearby," another offered. "You're overthinking it." I wanted to believe them. I really did. But then one night, I came home and my front door was slightly open. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out. I knew I had locked it. I always locked it. I backed away. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone as I called the police. When they arrived, they searched the apartment. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place. They said it could have been the wind. I knew it wasn't the wind. After that, I stopped sleeping properly. Every little sound made me jump. I kept a knife under my pillow, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I installed extra locks. I stopped going to the gym. I changed my routine completely. But he was still there. He never did anything. That's what made it worse. He never threatened me, never touched me. But he was always there, always watching. I started noticing more things. A shadow lingering outside my apartment building. The feeling of being watched when I walked to work. The eerie sensation that if I turned around too quickly, I'd catch a glimpse of him just slipping out of sight. Then the notes started. Slipped under my door, written in neat, almost elegant handwriting. "Why are you ignoring me?" Then another, "I think about you all the time. We're meant to be." I felt like I was suffocating. My home, my sanctuary, didn't feel safe anymore. I started staying with Rachel, my coworker, more often. She was the only one who truly believed me. One night, we were walking home together after work when she grabbed my arm. "Don't turn around," she whispered. "He's behind us." My blood turned to ice. I wanted to turn, I wanted to see. But Rachel's grip tightened and we kept walking. We took a longer route home, weaving through busy streets, ducking into a convenience store to buy time. When we finally got to her apartment, I collapsed onto her couch, shaking. "We need to do something," she said firmly. "The police won't help until something happens. We need proof." So we made a plan. I started keeping track. Every time I saw him, I wrote it down. Every place, every time. I took photos. I started recording. Rachel helped. We built a file. Something undeniable. Then we set a trap. I posted on my story, a fake one, set so only he could see it. Finally, going back to my favorite cafe, needed some fresh air. And we waited. Rachel sat inside pretending to read. I stayed outside pretending to be on my phone. It didn't take long. He showed up. He lingered outside watching me through the glass. He didn't order anything. He didn't talk to anyone, just watched. And then he started walking towards me. That's when the cops moved in. I'll never forget the look on his face when they grabbed him. The way his mask slipped for the first time. The surprise. The anger. The realization that this time, he wasn't getting away with it. They questioned him, but since he hadn't physically harmed me or directly threatened me, the charges were limited. He was detained briefly and issued a restraining order, legally forbidding him from coming near me. It wasn't the dramatic ending I had imagined, but it was something. A line had been drawn. If he contacted me again, he would face real consequences. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running, and he wasn't watching. It wasn't over forever, but it was over for now, and that was enough. It happened in 2022, a friend request from a stranger. Harmless at first. At least, that's what I thought. Her name was Sophie, a generic name, a generic profile. Nothing about her seemed off. No provocative photos, no obvious red flags. Just a smiling face, a few posts about travel and coffee, and a handful of mutual friends. Curiosity got the best of me. I accepted. The first message came the next day. "Hey, thanks for accepting. How's your day going?" Polite, casual, the kind of message I'd ignore if it came from a random account. But something about her seemed normal. I responded. We talked, nothing heavy, small talk mostly. She asked about my hobbies, my favorite places, the kind of music I liked. She admired my taste, said she loved my sense of humor. She always had a way of making me feel interesting, like I had something special to say. It felt harmless, innocent. My wife and I had been together for years, and while we weren't struggling, we had fallen into a routine. Conversations were predictable, days repetitive. Sophie, on the other hand, was fresh, interested, engaged, and I didn't even realize how much I was enjoying that attention. Days turned to weeks, and our conversations continued. Sometimes brief, sometimes longer. She asked about my day, my plans, my childhood. I shared small pieces of my life, nothing intimate, just little anecdotes. I rationalized it. She was just a friendly person, nothing more. Then, one evening, she sent me a photo. It wasn't explicit, but it was suggestive. It made my stomach tighten, a jolt of unease running through me. I hesitated. Before I could even react, another message popped up. "Oh no, wrong person. I'm so embarrassed. Can you delete that for me?" I didn't know what to say. My instinct told me something was wrong. But before I could type a response, another message. "You didn't save it, did you?" I frowned. Of course I hadn't. But something in her tone had changed. It wasn't playful anymore, it was accusatory. "I see you saw it," she wrote. "What kind of man saves a picture like that?" Confusion set in. I hadn't saved anything. I told her as much, but she didn't believe me. A moment later, she sent a screenshot, my name next to her photo with a timestamp. My mind reeled. I hadn't done that. I told her it wasn't real, that she was mistaken. She didn't care. "That's disgusting," she said. "I trusted you." Before I could respond, she sent another message. "I don't know what to do. Should I tell your wife?" Panic hit me like a fist. I hadn't done anything wrong, but the way she framed it made it seem otherwise. My hands shook as I typed, trying to reason with her, but she wasn't interested in reason. Then came the real threat. $500, she said, "and this all goes away." I stared at the screen in disbelief. I felt sick. I refused. I told her she was making a mistake. She laughed. The emails started the next morning. First to my wife, fabricated messages, edited screenshots, photos manipulated in ways that twisted reality just enough to look real. The worst part? My wife believed them. She confronted me, her voice trembling. I swore to her it wasn't true, begged her to listen, but trust is fragile. A few pictures, a few words, and years of love can be undone in an instant. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe someone had hacked my account. But the more Sophie sent, the more it chipped away at whatever faith my wife had left in me. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said one night, eyes red from crying. The silence between us grew heavier. The distance in our home stretched wider. I could feel her slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. Meanwhile, Sophie escalated. More messages, more lies. She created fake profiles, sent messages to my in-laws, my friends. "Ask him about the other women," she wrote. "He's been hiding things for years." The people in my life who had known me for decades suddenly looked at me differently. Doubt flickered in their eyes. The damage was spreading, unstoppable. I barely slept. Every night I lay in bed, my wife an arm's length away but a world apart. I could hear her quiet sniffles, the way she curled up tightly, as if trying to protect herself from me. I stopped going online. Every notification sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. But Sophie didn't need my response to keep going. She had everything she needed to dismantle my life. I went to the police. They listened, took notes. But in the end, they shook their heads. "No real crime," they said. "It's just the internet." Just the internet. But the internet had destroyed my life. Desperate, I found a cybersecurity expert, someone who had seen this before. He dug deep, traced accounts, followed patterns. Sophie wasn't real. She wasn't just one person, she was a network, a machine of deception. Her real name, unknown. Her location, fluid. Her victims, many. Armed with proof, I went to court. Fraud, harassment, identity manipulation. It was enough to silence her. And then she disappeared. No more emails, no more messages, no more threats. But peace is relative. I lost my wife, my home, my peace. And even though she's gone, I'll never feel safe again. I share this now, not for sympathy, but as a warning. Because next time it could be you.